Ah, it's Odyssey. It's the third part of the Odyssey.
You know what's weird?
Alien Odyssey. What?
Besides this guy's talking to aliens in his free time, Katie and I have been playing almost nonstop Mario Odyssey.
Shut up. Are there aliens in that?
There's UFO in a final kingdom, but we're not going to spoil it for people, although that kind of gave it away a little bit.
So, just out of curiosity, do you guys play video games together, like, often? Or, like, what are the big video games you guys play? Because Paul and I do that sometimes as well, so I'm just sort of curious.
A lot of our video game playing involves Katie kind of dejectedly looking at Instagram on her phone as I play Rocket League with Paul and Minkus. That's a big part of our video game playing.
That's nice. That's good together time.
It's good times, yeah. Katie kind of sighing every time I scream at the TV. We play a lot of Mario together. We play a lot of Pokemon together. We play a lot of. It kind of depends on the game. I mean, again, Katie. Interestingly, I've been getting her into watching Twitch streamers, which I absolutely love. Like, if podcasting ever takes off, that's definitely what I'm going to do as a second thing is Twitch stream video games all the time.
So what is a Twitch stream?
It's
just basically.
So
go ahead.
It's you play video games live and people can chat and like ask you to do stuff and whatever, and then usually there's a video feed of you, like your face.
Okay.
So it's super fun. And so the one that we watch is Lobos Jr., who is super cool. He's a great guy. Just raised like over $100,000 for charity or something. Actually, he's the reason that we're going to try to do our charity thing for Halloween until Christmas, which is going to be really cool. Hopefully if it gets off the ground. But anyways, it's just fascinating.
Paul asked me the other day, I don't know how we got into it, but he's like, how could you make money playing video games? And I was like, what, baby? I'm like, you can make some serious cash.
Oh my goodness. People just...
Fatality!
Yeah,
right?
people just love...
Yeah.
People just love watching people do stuff.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
See, my husband doesn't get it, because then I had to explain to him the only celebrity that I remember, which was from back in the day now, which is Fatality, which was the kid who played, I want to say Doom? Was it Doom? It was something, and he was amazing at it. It wasn't Doom. It was another game. And, like, he just racked up, like, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And, you know, he was, like, maybe 17 or 18.
No, it's crazy. There was a kid at the school that I taught at who was a professional League of Legends player.
Good God, that's awesome.
And so he'd come to class, and, like, he'd take classes and whatever, and it was like, well, you know, video games aren't going to pay for everything all the time. But it's like, they're paying you more than they've ever paid me. I've never made any money. Okay, we're getting off topic here, Marie.
No, but that's a good talk. That's still, like...
It's fascinating.
Look, kids, listen up.
Actually,
you don't have to quit school.
We had a listener...
Play video games. We had hella video games. Get good at that. That's a moneymaker.
We had a listener add me on Xbox Live.
Oh.
Yeah, which was awesome. My Xbox Live handle is Mad Scientist Cogswell. So find me, listeners. It's great fun. All right. Let's get into this episode. So last time where we left off, John and Phyllis had met the aliens Dahlia. They had met Etron. And they had their first scary experience with an unknown being.
Yes.
Who took over Phyllis.
Yes.
And tried to get her to jump off the balcony.
Which is troubling.
This episode,
on many levels.
This episode, we promised it'd get weird. This episode gets weird. There's going to be more aliens than you know what to do with. Jake, roll the tape.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Mad Scientist Podcast. This week's episode, Alien Odyssey Part 3.
Okay, and we're back. We're here.
We are. So we're like, I would say we are a good, maybe 2/3 of the way through this very short novelette.
Yeah, I would say we probably have one more. We probably have one more episode full on this story itself. And then the actual theory section. That's where I'd say we're at.
I mean, we can, yeah, I think that's fair. I'm just saying that because I feel like, so we're now into the meat of it, and like you were saying, Cox, it's kind of crazy because all of a sudden they start to name drop aliens that I'm reading it, and he's like, he'll be kind of just, and then I discussed it with Atron, or then I discussed it with, and I'm like, wait a minute, so are you still talking? Are they embodied in your poor wife, Phyllis?
They are.
Which I'm assuming they are.
They are every time.
But they make it seem like, and then Phyllis and I discussed it with so-and-so, the alien, and you're like, well, but that's her. So it's this weird sort of, like, their day-to-day life and kind of decision-making and discussing and learning. It's like these aliens are a third party in the story, so you'll be reading it and they'll be like, we had an extensive conversation with Dahlia about how she learns and how she went about things in getting used to being in a human host. And then you're like, you're talking to your wife. Like, it's like, it's really difficult to visualize it because you keep, like, if you're like me and you're reading something, you visualize things and you keep having to, these chapters kept having me check that and be like, but he'd be sitting there either talking to himself or talking to his wife. Or he'd be very upset, like Phyllis was very mad at him, and so Zebulon would come and counsel him on what he could do to make things better because she was not talking to him. And I'm like, but you're talking to her now.
Right, yes. Well, it takes... well, you're talking to her now. I think probably the perfect...
That's when I was like, oh, wait. Yes.
I think probably the perfect example of this, we're going to talk about this. So let's just jump into the story here. It does get very confusing. There's actually, my favorite quote in this whole book is here on page 52.
Oh man, you're way ahead.
Which
now.
we're going to say specifically, but okay. So we're at the point now where Etron has told them they're going to give her and John, Phyllis and John, an alien named Dahlia to take care of.
Yes.
And they don't really know anything about, like, they don't know how smart they don't know Dahlia's age, they don't know how intelligent she is, they have no idea sort of what level she's at. But all that they know is that when Dahlia first comes to them, she can hardly write, she doesn't really understand English, and she has a very hard time being in Phyllis's body, supposedly. So,
yes.
In this, so they start, they kind of train Dahlia for quite some time. They kind of go back and forth with her or whatever.
Yes.
And they start talking. John mentions in the book here a couple of interesting points that I think are weird but interesting. So first he says that in asking Dahlia how is she able to actually do this to Phyllis? Mm-hmm. And then at the same time, how is it seemingly, because at the same time, they're starting to have almost poltergeist activity in their home.
So again, like, yes. So this is where, so then I'm like, okay, so what's up with all this? You got a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff happening. A lot of, I would say, almost conflicting in some ways.
Yeah. So,
to me.
So here's the quote. It says, quote, Dahlia explained that her own body was tangible, the same as ours, but the atoms in her body vibrated at a much faster rate than ours, causing her body to be invisible to us unless we were also very highly attuned to a higher energy level. Some people, she told us, could see her, which we learned later was true. She said she had weight and temperature, but much less of both than we have. Dahlia claimed she would eventually die, and since she was not immune to Earth diseases, she was susceptible to them. End quote.
So let's just unpack that there for a minute.
Sure.
So she's vibrating her atoms so quickly that she is not apparent to the human eye, and she can also vibrate Phyllis's atoms so quickly that she can take Phyllis through solid walls.
No. Okay, what I think it is, well, yeah, that does happen.
Does happen.
What I think,
so
okay,
science me this, doctor. Because that's also the same premise that's behind, if memory serves, and I have not Googled this, so get ready for some mad conspiracy here. Philadelphia experiment had the same type of had the same type of math logic.
It
right?
is
Or
actually, and
logic-esque.
he mentions that here. He mentions
Boom.
that here,
All
right?
right.
He mentions it when later on an alien attacks Phyllis and actually like hides her in a broom closet or something. It's not just
that's
this
right.
lady.
So maybe it was here. But I remember thinking that before that incident. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, keep going. Yeah,
Okay, so
spoiler.
I think the idea is that when this argument is made, this idea of atoms vibrating at a different frequency or something, that obviously doesn't make any sense. Because atoms, although they do vibrate at the level of real matter, of bulk matter, that vibration or that vibratory energy is so slight as to be almost negligible. Like the size of particles where the vibration of the particles has any effect or any real that vibration would be, or speed or whatever velocity would be such that something like this could be the case, would be subatomic particles. And so perhaps their DNA and all their organic material or whatever they're made up of is made up of these subatomic particles only. That, I guess, is a possibility. Maybe it fits outside of our chemistry and biology and biochemistry as we know it today, but maybe that's possible. But then
she says she's the same. She ages and has the same.
Well,
as we do.
And that's the part that then doesn't make a lot of sense is if that's the case where they're just made up of different types of bonds or something, but their particles, whatever they are made out of physically, allows them to move at or forces them to move at a faster speed than we can even perceive. Again, that is not so out of the realm of possibility, I think, as to be ridiculous. Where it does become ridiculous is why would that cause them to be able to interact with us in a more, like it brings up all these other interesting questions, such as if that's the case, then that suggests that there's a part of us that's separate but still made up of clearly then Phyllis's consciousness or soul or whatever is made up of the same stuff that Dahlia is made up of fully. Right? And if that's the case, then why can't we remove ourselves or separate ourselves from our physical bodies? Or why can't we then, so or
if we can, it's because of this.
Right, right.
People could say, well, you have out of body,
right, you can do it.
Remote viewing, but yeah.
So it becomes sort of a chicken.
If you believe any of this anyway.
Right, if you believe any of this at all, it becomes a chicken or the egg kind of thing. And the other part of this, though, so the part of this I think is actually is a very interesting way to switch all of this around is he then mentions that because these beings are made up of lighter matter or different matter, and maybe not even different matter, but different combinations of matter than we're made of, they're able to move at a more rapid rate than we are, which is what allows them to travel through space. So they mentioned that Dahlia can travel, I think he says he clocked it here at 3,000 miles an hour by measuring how long it took her to get from New Hampshire to Arizona. That is interesting. But again, kind of it just makes a lot of questions.
Science light sort of thing.
Yeah, sort of.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So science-esque. Because when I was reading this, I was like, okay, so let me think, like, again, not knowing, if atoms are vibrating that quickly. I mean, your bulk, too. I'm assuming as your person, you're vibrating them. Like, you would really have to shake a person incredibly to make that, and that doesn't make any sense. Like, I can't get to, if you're an alien and you have a totally different makeup of your physical body anyways, okay, but no, human-wise, what? Usually
when they are mentioning these like vibration things or vibratory things, what they're hinting at is ideas like, say, superstring theory, or a lot of the times when scientists are trying to simplify kind of the harmonic oscillatory nature of the atom or electron clouds, the way that we actually like the way that their math is described. We try to describe it in terms that people can understand, and for some reason, we think that
was very poetic.
Well, I was going to say, for some reason, we think it's easier for people to understand how a guitar string works. So it's like if you pluck a guitar string at a certain tightness of the string, it'll give you a note, and if you then tighten it, it'll give you a higher note. That's kind of the way that quantum particles in a probability state or energy probability function will operate. So the harmonic oscillator or the Hamiltonian function can be plucked by adding or subtracting energy out. And then you have certain states, certain energy levels that they can operate at.
Yes.
So, or certain energy levels that they can achieve.
But how tightly would you have to pluck Phyllis to get her to do that?
Yeah. That's, I think, the argument that they're making, or that's kind of what they're hinting at. But again, it's all science gobbledygook. It's all someone. This to me sounds like someone who understands enough science to be mystical and mystifying, but not enough to make a really well thought out answer. You know,
so me, I'm just teasing.
I mean, this sounds like good sci-fi, but the turn of this though that I do like is that travel idea. That this is why they're able to travel through space more quickly than we are. That I think is fascinating. Okay.
So I will be like, I'm good with that. Like, to me, I'm good with that. But so here's I have like some, I don't want to say some quarrel with John Meloney in this, but these chapters to me are somewhat problematic because then it's, Atra, the idea of Atra being sort of this poltergeist. Or
let's get into it because we haven't even introduced Atra yet.
Oh my God! Well, who again is Phyllis?
So last episode we mentioned that there was an alien attacks her at night and tries to get her to jump off the balcony.
Yes.
In this episode, in this chapter here in this series, they're training Dahlia. All this is going on, and then they finally meet another person who seems to be able to see Dahlia. So they mentioned that early in October, we read in the newspaper that Dr. Alushi Francesca, and that's Aleuti, of the Solar Light Retreat in White City, Oregon, was going to speak on UFOs at Hanover, New Hampshire. Now, I looked into Dr. Aluti. I believe she calls herself a doctor in the way that Dr. Mario is a doctor, which is that
the way I am a doctor,
which is that
I like to call myself a doctor,
which is that I bet she owns a stethoscope. This is a quote from ashtarcommandcrew.net/events/Cosmic Eye Ashtar Command 2. Okay, so quote. So first off, the photo.
Let me just empty my chakras for this.
Okay, the photo here is of 3 very old people in brightly colored crushed velvet robes.
Dope.
Eating what appears to be cheesecake and having coffee. And so
Sign me up.
It says, born in London, Aluti is a doctor of spiritual science. Reed owns a stethoscope. And director of the Solar Light Retreat in Oregon. From the age of 16, she researched ancient esoteric teachings and was a reporter for a psychic newspaper for 3 years. If you're a psychic, how good? If you're a psychic, you don't need a newspaper because you know what happened.
She's reporting out. She's sending the word out to the masses, dude.
Since childhood,
while having cheesecake.
She has been naturally telepathic, and after moving to California, developed telethought communication with space beings.
But you know what? Just spoiler alert, we all do. All Californians have that. You come to California, you get the driver's license. So at the DMV, at the same time, it's like right next to the form with the register to vote. You get that.
So Dr. Francesca receives transmission through telethought contact. This is not a trance state, but is a connection alpha wave, but a conscious alpha wave state in which Miss Francesca places herself at the time a transmission to be received with the core group present. The telethought beam, I think they mean beam, is aligned to Mrs. Francesca's own individual brainwave frequencies from what is XYZ relay craft.
Exactly California.
So she believes that she has been speaking with Earth beings, or space brothers, rather, since the 60s. So, she says so John and Phyllis go to one of her talks in Hanover, New Hampshire. And evidently at the talk, she points at Phyllis and says, I know that this person is aware of what I'm going to talk about and is in contact with the Space Brothers. Supposedly. So then Phyllis and her they hit it off. They're all talking to each other. And then Elodie shows her a picture of her husband. And Phyllis looks at it for a little bit and, nothing happens, whatever. And then she kind of goes into a trance and she says, this man's being held against his will. He's a prisoner someplace. He's under armed guard in Mexico. And, that's kind of it. And as she says this, supposedly a bump appears by her neck, almost like near her chest, that she calls a moshi. The moshi.
She doesn't call it a moshi.
The aliens call it a moshi.
Dahlia calls it a moshi.
So supposedly it is a type of alien antenna of some sort that lets her contact with the Space Brothers. So we then have.
You could see where suspension of belief is now coming into play.
Yeah.
In the final. Yeah.
So now we have a point where Dahlia comes back to them. They return home. Dahlia returns to Phyllis's body, and they're talking about, again, training, whatever. One day Phyllis gets sick, and Dahlia tries to come in, and Phyllis says, please don't enter, don't do this. I'm not feeling well. Let me rest. Okay. So what John tells Dahlia is, why don't you go talk to Elodie and try to find her husband, Gene, who evidently is being held prisoner in Mexico for stealing crushed velvet blouses or something. So Dahlia travels over there and then doesn't come back for like a week. And they're like, what is going on at this point?
Yeah, she travels over there. Again, this is what I love is like, you say she travels over there. She's keep going.
Okay, so Dahlia comes back, breaks into Phyllis's body, and Phyllis just starts sobbing. And Dahlia's like, I was surrounded by black auras of evil, and they came to attack me, and then finally I prayed to God, and God opened up a crack in the black auras with his white aura, and I was able to escape. And so, supposedly, what this was an alien being named Atra, who had previously been attacking John and Phyllis. This was the being that was responsible for Phyllis trying to jump over the roof or jump over the balcony or whatever. It is the one that has been
plaguing them,
basically messing with them. And Atra is going to be a thing that messes with them continuously now over time. So now we have Etron, who's their friend, kind of like the leader alien in some ways. We have Dahlia, who's kind of this weird, what's the word? Like this weird child alien almost that enters Phyllis's body and they try to teach it stuff. We have Atra, who is an evil alien. We have Drendy, who's like a friend of Etron's, who we didn't even get to talk about. Drendy.
College roommate.
Oh, wait, Drendy's the one that she first said she was talking to. And then we have just a random assortment of other aliens bopping in and out of this woman's brain. Okay. Now, what starts to happen that's kind of weird, though, is Dahlia now is like, well, I have to return back to Pochi and get more food pills or something.
Yes.
And so she's got to travel to Lansing, Michigan. Very specific that it's Lansing, Michigan.
Yeah, why was that? Like, I read that and I was like, and then I had to go back some pages because I'm like, did I miss something?
All the other,
like, is there some epicenter that's in Lansing?
all the other,
That's sort of strange, right? Strange specificity to that.
all the other alien hotspots make sense. It's like Sedona, Arizona. They're going to Roswell, whatever,
Gotcha.
and then they're like, Lansing. Lansing's a hot town right now for UFOs. So
Yeah, I was like, what? So not only that, but it's like, why? So that seems like a hop, skip, and a jump for somebody who can, vibrate their atoms and get, and have that fast of travel. But preparing for Lansing is like, my God, it's almost like taking a Greyhound. It sounded like,
Lansing's
it's like,
awesome.
What is this?
I don't know. So
Whew.
so she leaves for Lansing, and then they're feeling low. So Aethra attacks again and just tries to kind of control Phyllis. And what's interesting now is John, though, they start to bring in. We already mentioned that they prayed to God.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
with Aethra's attacks, this book starts to delve into a really weird fringe of the UFO community, which is like Catholic or evangelical ufology, where people make a direct line from, well, if UFOs are real and I think God is real, then they have to be connected together. And so these are either demons or they're angels or they're spirits or whatever. And so all of the stuff that the church tells me will work, like holy water, like prayers, like medallions, like whatever, all will have to work as well. And so John mentions a bunch that every time Aethra comes to try to attack, he'll spray holy water. He's making prayers. He's doing all kinds of weird stuff.
Yeah, and it's, again, this, like, real sharp duality. It's good or it's evil. But there's no, like, there's no... I would assume, and again, not knowing these characters necessarily, but that type of, like, good or bad may not apply to an alien civilization. Like, that's sort of making this assumption that we're going to be able to understand what their logic is.
Yeah,
right?
no,
it's
it's
like,
a
again, it's
huge
like,
leap.
even assuming, so I just wanted to double check that. Like, to me, that's a big, and that's like almost this that's where I'm like, oh man, like, you don't that's what I don't get about, I think that what he's experienced and what he's digging into on the data side of things. Like, again, you're working with NICAP, you're trying to prove these things. I have a hard time justifying that with this, I don't want to say pseudoscience, but, starting to run into pseudoscience and then religion on top of it. It's like, I think you have enough to go on by proving, almost an empirical proof of something, right? I mean, I don't want to belittle what his experiences are, but at the same time, I am a natural skeptic on certain things, and this is when I'm just like, oh, come on, man.
Yeah, it's
like, I will sit there and visualize all these aliens, even though you're just talking to your wife, but you gotta put down the holy water.
Yeah, it's a weird mix, because it immediately tells you that there's something else going on there, I think, where they're no longer investigating in good faith, right? Forgive the pun, but they're...
I didn't even tell you said it.
I know, it's a good one. But no,
you're cheesy.
I mean, you're completely right, though. It suggests that they already have a level of that this is no longer scientific, it's about belief. Right? It stops being scientific the minute you start to bring religious connotations into it. And maybe that's a part of the UFO problem inherently, but I think there's a lot of us that would like to think that we can do it without that. Okay, so they now start to have more and more contact with these other aliens. Dahlia returns finally after a couple of days, and
Lansing
is starting from Pochi through Lansing. It's a stopover.
Yeah.
And she starts to be able to kind of lower her vibrations of her atoms down to such an extent that Phyllis can see her in physical form. And so they decide to try to get Dahlia photographed at a local photography house that did exist in Claremont right when we first started going to Claremont, but then closed down shortly afterwards. And so this part's kind of weird. They just have a bunch of wacky stories and hijinks all together. This photographer tries to take a bunch of photos, can't get anything, of course, despite their best efforts. But then they say that, Etron brings a UFO down and shines light at Hal at night as he's like throwing out the garbage or something.
I love that.
But a legitimately scary event happens to them, supposedly, where John and Phyllis are in their apartment. This is after the photography session. They're in their apartment alone, they believe. And Phyllis is there 1 second and then she's gone the next. And what it appears happened, at least the way that John describes it, is that Phyllis disappears out of existence and then reappears in the neighbor's apartment through the wall.
Which again, what?
And then as John is looking around for her, she's like, where is she? I can't find her. This is crazy. He decides, because so much weird shit happens to them, that
yeah, this is my favorite part.
He decides, he's like, well, I guess she's dead. And he just like stops looking. And then Atra's like, okay, good joke. And he brings her back.
Now, did he thought that she was dead, or did he was just like, I'm just gonna, she thought there's some hijinks going on. I'm just gonna see what's on HBO.
Did
he just sort of like, la-di-da?
I think it was just like, he was just like, whatever. Right. And then, and this stuff's now ramping up. Like things are, like we made fun of in the beginning. Right.
Yeah.
But things are ramping up. Like it went from being just, psychic connections to these things, supposedly. They're having weird dreams. Phyllis is having these weird experiences at nighttime, whatever, to now physical things are happening to them. Where people around them are starting to see UFOs. That photographer saw one. They've seen UFOs all the time now. They're starting to see stuff happen to them around them, like things are pushed or moved or whatever, right? Like poltergeist activity is starting to ramp up. And so this next part maybe is some of the most chilling, I think it's some of the most chilling part of the book here. So I'm going to read the quote, Marie, quote. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. At Christmas time, Atra demonstrated her strength again. While we were eating dinner in the same room where we had a large decorated Christmas tree, something suddenly started shaking the tree. We feared that the ornaments would fall off. No one else was in the room that we could see except ourselves, and we were on the opposite side of the room. Later, Atra told us she did it just to show how powerful she was. On another occasion, we were visiting our friend Barbara Mills, who was the head of Vermont MUFON at the time, along with several other people who were interested in witnessing Phyllis Channel. Dahlia was addressing the group when she suddenly changed the subject from whatever she was speaking about and said, "Something bad has happened at your house. You will see it when you go home." When we got home around midnight, we found everything to be in order until we went to the second floor. The minute we got to the top of the stairs, we saw what had happened. When we left, there had been a bouquet of dried flowers in a basket about 18 inches tall on the floor at one end of the hall. The basket was lying on its side, and the flowers were strewn about 15 feet down the hall. The apartment had been locked while we were away. Atra had done her work again. So this alien is like, something terrible has happened, and then she just tips over their potted plants.
And then she's like, I am taking this potpourri and I'm putting it wherever I want.
So bad. All right.
Wherever I feel like it should go, it's there.
So.
Oh, Atra.
Okay.
Atra.
That's all joking aside. The next thing that does happen is pretty weird. So, Christmas ends.
Yeah.
Or Christmas is coming up. It's like wintertime, whatever. And so, two really weird events take place. One of which I kind of think they stole from the Mothman prophecies. And the other of which I don't know what the deal is. So the first.
So this one that we're going to talk about is the one that I sort of have beef with.
Okay.
Official.
Okay,
I can, everything else I can sort of, I'm willing to give it the pass. I'll suspend my belief and.
You think they
I
you
have
think
a
they
certain
tipped
amount
over the
by it.
rose? You think they tipped over the flowers?
I'm willing to give it to them. I'm willing to give it. At some point, they felt like they were something was causing physical. There was physical things that they couldn't explain. Okay, all right. I wasn't there. I didn't see it. They don't have proof of it, so I'm willing to take them at his word. But this actually, and we'll get into it, and I'll tell you why I have issue with John and Phyllis.
Okay. So,
Bum bum bum.
and this is probably, I would say, the biggest UFO event that happens to them by far. This is kind of in any other story, this would be the culmination. So,
Yes.
the aliens.
In any other story, but this one's an Odyssey.
This one's an Odyssey. So the aliens come and tell them that that first off, they say that they want them to meet an alien called Bigot, Bigaat, who is coming to them in Arizona, which makes perfect sense.
Okay.
The other one was that the Yankee nuclear power plant at Vernon, Vermont, was going to be shut down.
Yes.
And specifically that the aliens were going to shut it down and that they wanted John and Phyllis to help them in some way.
Yes.
So, now the aliens are coming to them consistently and saying, you're going to help us shut down this nuclear power plant. You're going to help us do something there. And finally, on December 15th, 1987, which I think is a typo. I think he means 1997. Dahlia writes to them, quote, tell people world need fix up mess to be ready for earthquakes, volcanoes, and nuclear spill from reactors hurt many people. Next spring, small one on East Coast. John then asks her where, and she replies, quote, New England. Don't let them use Vernon. He said, do you know this for sure? And she says, that message from Astar that guide me from Apollo. Not be healthy to people, many die, have to close down plant. Governor closed down. I'm not able to do this big thing alone. Help people, they not see me. They not believe if they not see. He then asked Dahlia, well, how do we do it? And she said, no, you try, that all I can say, blow up soon. January, February, March, April, May, boom, boom. But people already move if you tell them not get hurt so much. Do close plant. No close, be careful. Then on December 18th, again, there was this following communication, quote, John says, what is going to cause the nuclear reactor at Vernon to release radiation? Dahlia says, man do bad thing to big generator. Will he do it on purpose or by accident? No, not by accident. He be doing to help save people. He not know how to do it right. Who is going to do this? And Dahlia says, not know people. So they then get another message from Dahlia saying that she believes it'll be 3 employees who try to do this. Now, anybody who has read John Keel's wonderful Mothman prophecies knows this is literally the exact same scenario given for the nuclear power. I think it's the Indian Falls power plant, I believe, or nuclear plant. So interesting. Keel or Meloney, however you want to say it, then says he wrote to the actual Governor Coonan, on January 19th as follows. Dear Mrs. Coonan, it is not my usual practice to write to heads of state nor to people in public office of whom I am not a constituent. However, I feel morally bound to tell you that I have information that frightens me and which should be brought to your attention. The information that I have is that 3 employees of the Vernon nuclear power plant pose a serious threat to all of our safety because they are worried about the inherent dangers of nuclear power. One of them, and I don't know which, will probably try to do something to one of the generators in order to shut the plant down. It will be intentional sabotage, but none of the men have the technical knowledge to do this act safely without creating an unintentional nuclear spill that will kill and injure a lot of people, as well as make a sizable area in my state, New Hampshire, uninhabitable. I am sorry I cannot be more precise about which person presents the problem. I have no recommendation about how to meet this threat other than to replace all of the personnel, even if it requires shutting down the plant. I do not know how employees are picked, screened, or trained, but I do take this information seriously, and I hope you will also. The estimated time of this attack is next May. Most sincerely, John M. Meloney. Now...
And this is my beef with him, actually.
Okay. Now, he then claims that the the FBI contacts them.
Yes.
Saying
he's contacted by a number of people.
By an engineer at the plant.
Engineer.
Yep.
Yeah.
By the FBI supposedly, and by people who are legitimately freaking out that this guy is claiming that nuclear sabotage is going to take place.
Well, yeah. I mean, as well, like, I think from everything that I'm seeing, yeah, exactly. They're like, okay, if it is a threat, please tell us more about said threat. And there's letters, again, like you said, from the nuclear engineers at the plant saying, you know what, I got this letter. I definitely want to talk to you. I'm sure federal officials are going to want to talk to you as well. This is serious. When you start talking about employees sabotaging a nuclear facility, this gets real. It gets real fast.
Yeah.
You know, there's I don't think that, you know, like, so my beef with them is that they sort of put this out there and then they take off. They move.
They go to Arizona.
They're like, okay, we're done here. We've made them aware of it, and we're not gonna, like, no. You know, you sort of just lit this wildfire that's causing, like, you know, government officials to freak out. You know, a lot of time and taxpayer efforts on a nuclear facility that probably requires a lot of work because it was decommissioned. This has now been decommissioned.
Yeah.
But over something that, you know, again, I'm not saying you don't have it credible, but you didn't even really kind of test it against anything else. At least Keels, I felt, had a somewhat of a healthy amount of, I don't know, skepticism or like questioning it. Or this, it just seems like, well, we wrote the letter and then me and Phyllis got in the trailer and off to Arizona. So that's where I feel like I'm like, oh man, that's not responsible. Like, if you're putting this out there and you are a conduit to this information, then you are responsible for it.
Yeah. It's interesting that they just kind of leave, and this starts a period. This starts a period of time where they're just kind of crisscrossing the country, visiting different UFO hotspots and conventions and speaking circuits and things. Because at this time, Phyllis has become something of a alien celebrity in some ways, with people booking her on the psychic circuit, you know, to come and channel and speak to them and talk to abductees and contactees and what have you. But the FBI is
trying to find
is after them yes. Because it appears that they have at the least threatened nuclear sabotage. Like, at best, they have information that someone will sabotage this plant. At worst, they are threatening to sabotage it.
Yes.
Like, it's not a great look for them either way.
It's not something that you're like, hey, you know what? I'm going to put this out there and then I'm just going to take off. Like, no. And you would think that the aliens would counsel on this as well.
Yeah.
Because if they are so concerned about a nuclear annihilation or a nuclear threat, then, and they also know how, you know, capricious humans are, but they can't appear to them, then you would have to, you know, help shepherd us through to a better result than just being like, yeah, and eventually, like, it's like a few chapters later that the FBI finally tracked them down.
It's interesting. Sorry. No, it's fine. I mean, so interestingly, the FBI finally catches up with them.
Yes.
Eventually. So during this period of traveling, they're going to meet an alien called Bigot, who is like the Mr. Bean of aliens. He's like, you know, they're like, he's like, meet us in Sedona, Arizona. So they go to Sedona, and then Bigot's like, oh, my alien, I crashed. I crashed in the desert someplace. I don't know where my keys are. You know, they're like, okay, that's fine, Bigot, whatever. Oh, that Bigot again. And so then they just just traveling around the country trying to meet this alien, and They keep meeting these other ones. They have an interesting situation where they meet with an alien called, or not an alien. They go to a town called Zebulon in Georgia.
Oh, yeah.
Where there is supposedly a psychic that Etron is like, we've been communicating with this young-ish black guy who is in Zebulon, Georgia. Their town is kind of weird, but you got to find him and talk to him because he's going to help you.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
So I'll tell you what, go into Georgia and ask around.
For the psychic kid in Zebulon.
Psychic kid in Zebulon, and tell him the UFO sent you.
See how that plays out
in the South.
They finally get to Zebulon, which is a town of 1,000 people. Mm-hmm. The sheriff is like, oh my goodness, these old white people from New Hampshire want to go into the black part of town and cause some trouble. Right? They have to get the sheriff's explicit permission to go talk to this kid. They go to a barbershop to try to find him. And there is a kid there who matches the description and seems interested in talking to them, but all of his friends are like, you are not going with those people. We don't know who they are. Do not go with them. And then they're just like, get out of our store, whatever. So they leave.
Oh, yeah.
And then later on, they find out that like a week before, there had been a huge KKK rally in the town. And so all these folks are like freaking out that these, this guy and his wife are here to take this kid away to beat him or something, So it's so weird.
Yeah.
And the thing is too, a lot of these stories seem like they are misplaced in time, right? Like, was the KKK still holding rallies in, I mean, they are. I know they are. That is a stupid question. I've seen them on CNN. But,
yeah,
was that, I don't know. It seems so odd to me.
Was that the timing? I don't know. There is sort of like there's a lot to unpack, right? I think there's like a social message, almost a quasi-religious message, and then maybe somewhere there's like, mental health message, and then there's what if there is some strange event, there's that. But it's sort of like, it's hard for me to like read that they went to Zebulon, and we're looking around for a black man who lived in Zebulon who is known as a psychic, and they're just going to kind of just, good-heartedly drive around and try and find this guy. To me, it's just like, that's an insane sort of privileged fantasy.
Yeah.
It's
really weird.
That's strange. But it's sort of like, well, all right, so let's pretend, and they even talk about, he obviously they weren't from around Georgia because of their accent and their New Hampshire license plate on their van, which again, it's like, I just don't even know what to do with it, right? Like, John, Phyllis, what are y'all up to? You're gonna walk around and do this, and I am surprised that, like, I don't know. It's just it's sort of baffling, but at the same time, it's like that's one of my favorite chapters, Zebulon, a scary fiasco. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, John.
So we're at the part of the story now where John and Phyllis are, maybe without realizing it, running from the FBI.
They're running from the law.
Running from the law.
They're on the lam. Only as two old people can be.
These two old people packed bags full of crystals on their way to Sedona.
Sort of like the Bonnie and Clyde of the UFO set.
It's fascinating. They're going. No. So they're on their way to meet Bigot. They're on their way to meet this alien. And again, the attacks from Atra and the seeming ability for Phyllis to channel these beings and have physical effects increases with time. So they're talking. They have one section, and this is kind of where we're going to end off this episode. Is They're driving on their way to Arizona. And Phyllis says that Atra has just threatened to do something to her to make her feel uncomfortable. She's like, I don't really know what's going to happen, but Atra says she's coming for me. Phyllis's stomach supposedly then swells to like 2 times its normal size. To the point that her clothes are like ripping off of her in a weird way. And Meloney, this is maybe my favorite quote of the entire book. He says, quote, I stopped the van and got out and we both strengthened our auras. Then, according to my diary, I did the flaming sword ritual around the van, made a pantograph and prayed. As I write this years later, I don't remember just what the flaming sword ritual or the pantograph were. Then the swelling started to go down. We asked Drendy if there was anything else we should do. He said we should strengthen our auras every day.
Which is just good advice.
And
I don't care who you are.
That's what I want to leave you listeners with, is you should strengthen your auras every day. So they finally make their way to Rock City, New Mexico, and then into Arizona. They meet a bunch of other aliens during this time. They meet aliens called Arco Santi is a prototype city on Mars that they go to see. Interestingly, they meet a bunch of other they just meet a bunch of other aliens. They meet Drendy again. They meet Begot finally, kind of, although Begot appears to them as sort of almost like a Men in Black kind of figure, where it's like these weird people will bike or walk by them and kind of stare at them. And they're like, what is this? And then afterwards, Etron's like, that was Begot. You couldn't tell by his big weird eyes. You know, you couldn't tell that guy that was staring at you drooling. It was Begot. Come on. You know, so it's this is really now we're hitting peak strangeness here. Things are getting weird. And so next time, or actually, I'm sorry, I want to talk about one final really interesting thing. So on the way to Sedona, we kind of glossed over this. On the way to Sedona, they decide to stop in Virginia because an alien says that they should go see him in his name is Sudak, and says you should come see me, right? So they then finally meet one of my favorite aliens, Temamet, who is a seemingly older female alien presence, clearly much older than Dahlia, who takes control of Phyllis very fully, who really does a much better job than Dahlia can do. And what they talk about is, they're on a bus in Washington, D.C., and Temamet takes over Phyllis's body. And supposedly when this happens, Phyllis's spirit kind of stays like next to the body, but it doesn't necessarily move with the body. So, and Phyllis like doesn't remember whatever happens when she's out of her body in these ways. So what happens is John and Temamet in Phyllis's body get off the bus, but Phyllis's spirit stays on the bus.
Oh, man.
And so the doors close and then the bus is going, and Temamet starts to flip out in Phyllis's body and starts talking alien to John.
Yeah, and meanwhile, her spirit is riding public transit in Washington, D.C.,
yeah,
which is not a good idea.
No, so Temamet is like freaking out, right? And finally is like, oh my god, we have to get back Phyllis, you know, and then starts talking alien, whatever. And so what they end up doing is John like counts Phyllis back into her body with a prayer, almost, and that somehow works to bring Phyllis back. It's, again, it is a very strange example of, you have these situations where what happened to these two people? Like, and I don't mean that to sound funny. Like, it is funny.
No!
It's weird.
Well, it's like, to me, it's like, okay, so let's pretend, for the sake of argument, that has nothing to do with alien. Like that, this whole alien thing it's not real. It doesn't exist. If you were reading this, and this person who you were married to, who you trust and you love, are having these clearly psychotic break episodes, you would seek help, right? You wouldn't, like, that's where I'm sort of like, okay, well, you can't capitalize on this, right? Because if you read this one, The Adventures in Washington D.C. is just sort of a, again, like, she has like, forget alien anything, she's clearly dissociative, right? I mean, there's big, and instead of like seeking a medical opinion or a medical profession about it, you channel your third eye and count her back into her body. But it's like, in one earlier example, she was suicidal. Like, she was going to throw herself off of a building. So that's where I'm sort of like, if it's not what you say it is, John Mulaney, in the book, and even if it is, scientifically, don't you have some sort of responsibility to make sure that whatever's happening with this person is not causing them harm? Well, even if they say, I'm fine, I come out of it, I'm fine, I can't remember, I was on a bus, I'm great, you have, that's where I'm at with that.
See, what makes me wonder is almost what even then, like, what psychological condition could it be? Do you know what I mean? It's so,
I don't know. Yeah.
It's so complex. The delusional world then that they have built together is so complex, and it's not even based on the book, based on the story we've told so far. It's not just them in this delusional world, right?
No,
it's people like Aludi,
that's why it's delusional,
and it's people like the Vermont MUFON chapter, and it's people like or the people that were there at that time. It's this photographer that played along and took photos of the alien. Do you know what I mean? It's like the allowances then that other people are making are significant enough that it really, really makes you wonder.
Isn't that the hallmark of delusion, though? I mean, isn't
but
that
not,
like
but
the delusion doesn't just...
But that's what I'm saying, though.
Doesn't just affect you, or it doesn't just affect someone else. I mean, if it's a real delusion, it's a buy-in. I don't want to say mass hysteria, but it's because it's not necessarily that. But I'm saying that...
See, no. But what I'm talking about, what I'm saying is, let's say this does start with Phyllis and John. Let's say it starts with Phyllis is sick. Phyllis has a break of some sort, whatever.
Yes.
And then John is enabling her for some reason.
Yes.
He doesn't realize it necessarily.
Let's say that. Okay.
But he's enabling her.
Yes.
There is a community of people around them that is feeding into and helping John enable this.
Yes.
Then.
Yes.
That suggests a much larger moral failure, I think.
Oh, yes.
And that's why I think this story, again, I honestly think, and this is kind of, we're getting into almost more of the
theories, I know.
But we're gonna touch on this. This is inevitable. It's inevitable. This is really, to me, what I wonder partially if this is why this story has not been told before, is because really in some ways it is a story of the decline of a man and wife together down this road of delusion to the point where the people that were part of this story are ashamed, right? And there are parts of this, though, that are still being told. There are still, that Ashtar website is a relatively recent, it's still updated. It's still updated.
Oh yeah.
I have met at UFO events, I have met people who claim to be in contact with Ashtar, with the same being that this doctor supposedly that Phyllis and John met claims to be in contact with, or at least this type of same thing. I don't think Aludi, or whatever her name is specifically saying that she's talking to Ashtar. But again, all of this is still going on. people like Graham Hancock and, a lot of the folks that are on Ancient Aliens today have this other side to their work where it's a pseudo religion almost of metaphysics of these benevolent space brothers are talking to some folks, and it's not that these people are losing their minds, it's that they're really talking to aliens. That is a very dangerous game to be playing. And
well, yeah, and I think to your point, to have a support system, but I mean, you also self-select into that support system, right? If you are this couple, you're going to surround yourself with people that reflect your own worldview. Everyone does. So it's like, I'm not surprised that this is, again, if this is a case of sickness, right? That this is what they are, that they attract into their life are people like the photographer, or people like the oh god, I can't even remember the cheesecake eating.
Aludi, Dr. Aludi.
Oh, Dr. Aludi. So I don't it's sort of a chicken and the egg type of thing. It's like, I don't know if, I think that they have responsibility to know that you are self-selecting those people, but in some ways no one at any time questions or at least in this story says, boy, maybe she seems very affected by these alien visitations, and you should just take her to, just to make sure everything's good.
Well, it becomes a question of, I think, too, at what point does delusion or does shared mythology just become religious belief? It's an uncomfortable question.
It's true.
It's a very uncomfortable question that we don't like to ask ourselves in the Western world, really. But if Phyllis says they're there, and Dr. Aludi says they're there, and Bill down the road says they're there, and you all have this you seem to have this shared experience. But I mean, even besides the idea of it being a mass mythology or a group mythology that starts to burn its way towards religion, what if it's true? What if we just haven't had our experiences yet? That's the part to me that again makes these stories generally so compelling. We can look at this and say it is patently ridiculous, right? The things that they're claiming that happened to them are patently ridiculous. But how much more ridiculous is these things than, I don't know, a beggar turning water into wine? I don't think that
it is. Agreed.
It's a question of, I think, because again, all of the things that now we're learning about alien contactees, supposed alien contactees, fit the things that they're talking about in this book. It is weird. It seems so strange as to be fanciful and farcical, right? It always seems weird and funny and strange with these real events, or these semi-real events, or the events that you really think are believable. In my mind, and that's what kind of makes them so scary, is that it's there's a famous quote, I forget who said it, but there's a famous quote that humor is just reaction to the unexpected.
Tragedy plus time.
Well, that's a different one, but it doesn't fit the point I'm trying to make, Marie, which is that
so close. Mm-hmm.
If comedy is found in the unexpected, and it's our reaction to the unexpected, then what could be more funny than, or what would be more comical than interaction with an intelligence that we can't even begin to understand? So, and that kind of sounds like cliched and weird and I don't know, it sounds stupid, but really in my mind, I don't know. There's something about the story that I find very, very compelling still, Marie.
Well, I'm clearly, on what collectively is probably our 4th hour discussing it. So I'm in. I got you. I'm here, bro. But I think the thing is like with anything, I think that there's the mythos, and I think somewhere there's the perceived truth of what happened. I don't know, like, without going through and kind of, you can parse out the facts, you can pull apart the story, you can prove certain things, you can verify certain things, but you can't verify what that person's experience was. So I think that's what's interesting, and I think that. But you have to apply a certain amount of critical thought to anything, just because I'm Marie Mayhew. So, and that's how I roll. But it's like I think that, but I can't dismiss it out of hand either, because I feel like if you dismiss it out of hand, then you are missing something. You may be missing something.
Agreed.
There's some of it I can dismiss, and there's some of it, like I said, that I sort of have a general, like, ethics principle with, like, you shouldn't punk the Federal Bureau of Investigation and think that, you're just gonna scoot off to Sedona.
Right, we're going on this vacation. Let me just write this warning letter to the FBI real quick.
Yeah, let me just say, could be fatal.
Right. Radiation.
Love, John Meloney. But so I think that there's that, and I just think, but at the same time, we're. Like, I think we got another episode or two out of it, my friend.
So, for sure we'll be back.
Coming down the pipe.
For sure we'll be back next week with what I believe will be the conclusion of the Alien Odyssey episodes. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about our theories, our ideas, whatever. Let us know, though, listeners, what do you think is going on? What's
going on with this?
What do you think is up with John and Phyllis? Do you think Phyllis is making it all up?
What's up with this?
Do you think John is, I don't know. What is your theory? What is your idea? Hit us up on social media, the Mad Scientist Podcast at gmail.com, at Mad Scientist Pod, at the website, of course, and on Facebook and Instagram and all the social media things. Mm-hmm. And if you haven't yet, go take a listen to Whatever Remains, the amazing new podcast from Marie Mayhew here on the Cuban Sonic Attacks. And
Sonic Attacks.
Subscribe, rate us on iTunes, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go watch our videos on YouTube and write nice comments about us. And we'll be back in 1 week.
Bye.
Thank you again, dear listeners, for listening to the Mad Scientist Podcast. I have been your host, Chris Cogswell, joined by my co-host,
Marie Mayhew.
If you'd like to contact the show, please send us an email at themadscientistpodcast@gmail.com. That's all one word. You can also follow us on Twitter at Mad Scientist Pod or at Team Giant Squid for Marie. And of course, you can see us on Facebook, on Instagram, and all over the internet as the Mad Scientist Podcast. And again, our logo is the one with the pumpkin head, so it's easy to see.
Mm-hmm.
If you've enjoyed the show tonight, please consider supporting us on Patreon, where the money that you give to us will help us to promote this show further, to make it better, and just to spend more time making it.
Because we love doing that.
We do love doing that. Our logo was designed by Carrie Shaheen. Our web design is done by Desdemona Howard.
Woohoo!
And our sound design is done by Jake Cardinal. Thanks again for listening.
Thank you. This has been a Damn It Chippy production.